Anselmus Cur Deus Homo. Book First, Chapter 7. How the devil had no justice on his side against men, and why it was that he seemed to have had it, and why God could have freed man in this way. Moreover, I do not see the force of that argument, which we are wont to make use of, that God, in order to save man, was bound, as it were, to try a contest with the devil in justice before he did in strength, so that, when the devil should put to death that being in whom there was nothing worthy of death, and who was God, he should justly lose his power over sinners, and that, if it were not so, God would have used undue force against the devil, since the devil had a rightful ownership of man. For the devil had not seized man with violence, but man had freely surrendered to him. If it is true that this might well enough be said, if the devil or man belonged to any other being than God, or were in the power of any but God. But since neither the devil nor man belong to any but God, and neither can exist without the exertion of divine power, what caused our God to try with his own creator, the suo in suo, or what should he do but punish his servant, who had seduced his fellow servant to desert the common Lord and come over to himself, who, a traitor, had taken to himself a fugitive, a thief, had taken to himself a fellow thief, with what he had stolen from his God. For when one was stolen from his Lord by the persuasions of the other, both were thieves. For what could be more just than for God to do this? Or should God, the judge of all, snatch man thus had out of the power of him who holds him so unrighteously, either for the purpose of punishing him in some other way than by means of the devil, or of sparing him? What injustice would there be in this? For though men deserve to be tormented by the devil, yet, yet the devil tormented him unjustly. For men merited punishment, and there was no more suitable way for him to be punished than by that being to whom he had given his consent to sin. But the infliction of punishment was nothing meritorious in the devil. On the other hand, he was even more unrighteous in this, because he was not led to it by a love of justice, but urged on by malicious impulse. For he did not do this at the command of God, but God's inconceivable wisdom, which happily controls even weakness, permitted it. And, in my opinion, those who think that the devil had any right in holding man are brought to disbelief by seeing that man is justly exposed to the tormenting of the devil, and that God in justice permits this, and therefore they suppose that devil rightly inflicts it. For the same being, from opposite point of view, is sometimes but just and unjust, and hence, by those who do not carefully inspect the matter, is deemed wholly just or wholly unjust. Suppose, for example, that one strikes an innocent person unjustly, and hence just deserves to be beaten himself. If, however, the one who was beaten, though he ought not to avenge himself, yet does strike the person who beat him, then he does it unjustly, and hence this violence on the part of the man who returns the blow is unjust, because he ought not to avenge himself. But as far as he who received the blow is concerned, it is just, for since he gave a blow unjustly, he just deserved to receive one in return. Therefore, from opposite views, the same action is both just and unjust, for it may change that one person shall consider it only just and another only unjust. So also the devil is said to torment men justly, because God in justice permits this, and man in justice suffers this. And when man is said to be suffered justly, it does not mean that his just suffering is inflicted by the hand of justice itself, but that he is punished by the just judgment of God. But if the written decree is brought up, which the apostle says was made against us, and cancelled by the death of Christ, and if anyone thinks that it intended by the decree, that the devil, as if under the writing of a sort of compact, should justly demand sin and the punishment of sin of man before Christ suffered as a death for the first sin to which he tempted man, so that in this way he seems to prove his right over man, I do not by any means think that it is to be so understood. For that writing is not of the devil, because it is cancelled the writing of a decree of the devil, but of God. For by the just judgment of God it was decreed, and as it were confirmed by writing, that since man had sinned, he should not henceforth of himself have the power to avoid sin or the punishment of sin. For the Spirit is outgoing and not returning, as enim spiritus fadens et non radians, and he who sins ought not to escape with impunity, unless pity spare the sinner, and deliver and restore him. Wherefore we ought not to believe that, on account of this writing, there can be found any justice on the part of the devil in his tormenting men. In fine, as there is never any injustice in the good angel, so in an evil angel there can be no justice at all. There was no reason, therefore, as respects the devil, why God should not make use of his own power against him for the liberation of men.